Services will be put on if needed. Woody's DIY says children under 16 will be banned from its shops when they open up again on Monday. The hardware retailer says staff are worried social distancing will be harder to achieve if children are let in. It says it will make arrangements for people if they get in touch using its website. And a commemoration for the 88 Gardaí killed in the line of duty since the foundation of the state has taken place this afternoon. Garda Commissioner Drew Harris paid tribute at the ceremony at Dublin Castle earlier.
Gardaí keep the people of Ireland safe every day of the year, and never more so than during the current pandemic that is affecting our country and indeed the world.
It's 3:02.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. Need to renew your AA car insurance? Go online to the aa.ie/myAA.
Mostly cloudy for the rest of the day with scattered showers. Rain and drizzle will push into the west and northwest later this evening, staying mild with top temperatures of 12 to 16 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.
You are welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through till 5 o'clock in the company of the football correspondent of the Irish Independent, Daniel McDonnell, and the broadcaster and journalist, Johnny Ward. Remember, our football coverage brought to you with thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. You can text us on 53106. You can tweet us at Off the Ball. You can also watch us because we're streaming live now as well on the Off the Ball social channel. So for Periscope on Twitter, at Off the Ball, on YouTube, on Facebook, and you can listen on the Go Loud app. So with no live football in Ireland or England, of course the Bundesliga is back now for the foreseeable future. Every Saturday at 3, we're having a bit of fun chat around the FIFA World Cup for a bit of escapism in these serious times. Every week we're taking a year and having a chat about it. This year's is 1974 this week. West Germany winning in their own country, beating the Netherlands 2-1 in the final. Lads, I'm just checking the Bundesliga scores here, and Borussia Dortmund are 1-0 up on Schalke. That's their first goal since the Bundesliga resumed at the Westfalenstadion. None of us were live, though, in 74, but I suppose if you love history, if you love football, you'd know this tournament. You'd know about the Dutch, you'd know about total football, which had a thread from Cruyff through Guardiola. You'd know about the Germans. And as I run through the Bundesliga scores, probably quite apt today, guys, that we're doing this year.
Yeah, and Haaland with the goal as well, the first goal scored in the Bundesliga, certainly is pretty apt as well, considering, we've been so long without football. For one of the most promising young players in the world to get a goal is just, I think, the perfect start to the resumption of football in some respects. During the week, I watched the Ireland-USSR game from 74 when it was played in Dalymount. I hadn't seen it before, or certainly hadn't seen much of it, and couldn't get over the quality of the football. And to watch back, it was almost a little bit appropriate, I suppose, then that we were dealing with 1974 this week. This wasn't a World Cup that I'd watched at much length, JD, but I suppose to sum it up, I think it was almost more interesting for aspects that didn't actually revolve around the football itself. A lot of political stuff going on, a lot of really bizarre incidences, a lot of stories behind some of the teams that made it and didn't make it. The fact that the World Cup was obviously in West Germany as well, less than 30 years after the end of the war, and the fact that West Germany won the tournament. You can imagine what it was like, in terms of the patriotism of a country still trying to recover from what had gone on. And East Germany, Zaire, Yugoslavia, some of the countries no longer in existence, in effect, that were in that World Cup. And obviously Gerd Muller getting the winning goal in the final. There are lots of interesting aspects, and I suppose, as well as anything else, we're all wrapped up about global warming now. There wasn't much talk about that in the 70s, but this was a strange World Cup because it was played in pretty bad conditions considering where it was. And hopefully you'll have a bit of fun listening to us over the next hour or so as we obviously delve back into something that happened before our time.
53106 for your text messages. I was a young lad then. For the summer, I watched all of the Dutch games and probably half the tournament games. I remember the Dutch totally outplaying the Great Brazil team. Their goalkeeper was often on the halfway line. That was Jan Youngblood. I was broken-hearted to see the Germans beat them. That was football we'd never seen on TV. That is from Steve in Dublin. And lads, the thing about the 1974 World Cup final was the hate the Dutch had for the Germans. Don't agree with that, Mark and Moat. At the 1974 World Cup Super Show lads, Wim Jansen, the Dutch defender, became a Celtic legend, stopping Rangers 10 in a row league titles when he managed Celtic, although he made a clumsy tackle in the final, giving Paul Breitner the opportunity to equalise from the penalty spot. Looking forward to today's 74 World Cup show, the first I can remember as a football mad 8-year-old. Friday night watching a Scotland team packed with stars from my beloved Leeds, only beating Zaire 2-0. It cost them dearly when losing out on goal difference to Brazil and Yugoslavia. Thanks for your text. Dan, I suppose might just start with the Republic of Ireland. We were in a group with France and the Soviet Union. We beat the French at home, but we lost to the Soviets home and away. And Liam Toohey was the manager back then.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously qualification was a different animal at the time. It was just a three-team group, as you say. And we ended up in a situation where, yeah, we just weren't good enough. And actually the Soviet Union, who topped the group, got dumped out by Chile, I think, in the playoffs. So weren't actually good enough to qualify themselves. But
they refused to play.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Well, yeah, there's an absolutely mad story behind that, Dan.
I was waiting for Johnny to come in on this one. So
yeah, so the strange thing was there were 9 groups in Europe, but there were only sort of 8.5 teams, and one had to play a playoff against, as it turned out, to be Chile, and that turned out to be obviously our group. So if we had won that group, we'd ended up having to play Chile, but Pinochet had just come in a really ruthless coup in which Allende, the leader, the democratically elected leader of Chile, had basically probably been murdered by the coup that was more or less initiated partly by the CIA. So, you know, this game, the second leg, the first leg was 0-0 in Moscow. So obviously the Soviets might have been slightly up against it, but they refused to play in Santiago because the game was going to be played in a stadium that was basically a prison during the coup that housed 40,000 prisoners. And effectively they said, we're not playing in Santiago, we'll play in a neutral venue. The Chileans refused, and basically the Soviets said, right, we're having none of this. And there was a real fear then that Bulgaria, Poland and East Germany, who were obviously communist states at that time, wouldn't play in the World Cup at all. So if Ireland had topped the group instead of the Soviets, I wonder would we have had that, that experience of having gone to Chile, because even though the US weren't involved in this World Cup, they did actually have a little bit of an involvement behind the scenes.
Well, I don't think Liam Cosgrave's government was Marxist as the Allende government was in the early 70s. But you're absolutely right, Johnny. It was the Nixon administration backed this overthrow, this coup of the Chilean government. Just mad stuff. There's actually an ESPN documentary on it on the 30 for 30 series about this, people talking to political prisoners and people, like, even there was leftists in the team. It was just mad stuff. Absolutely.
And the other thing, JD, apparently under the stadium, like, it was basically, there were all these sort of torture chambers that, so the stadium itself was, was far more than a football stadium. So in fairness, as much as you can give out about whatever stance the Soviets took, this was a really difficult kind of political decision for them. And the fact that basically, this was a popular leader who was overthrown, and the Chilean players subsequently, and we'll talk about the Zaire players, what the pressures that they were under later on, but the Chile players subsequently, with Maggie's mate Pinochet playing under him, was an interesting experience as well.
17 years he governed as the dictator of Chile.
Yeah, like there is that political, as Johnny says, like there's a political undertone running through the whole competition, through qualifying, through the finals themselves, as you mentioned, West Germany and East Germany playing, and everywhere you look, there's some kind of story. Like Haiti were in the competition, and it's bizarre. We often frame this around the official film, the FIFA film, which is on Amazon Prime. And 1974, and we touched on this around 66, but 74 was the election where Stanley Rouse, the old English ruler of FIFA, who features prominently at the start of the film, which almost has an overlap with the 2010 one we spoke about last week with the English referee and the focus on the final and so on. But this was the election where Stanley Rouse was ousted by João Havelange, and FIFA was about to change and the profile was about to change, but the tournament itself was massively political because of the characters that were involved. But the language in the official film, it's Jeffrey Green, who was like the doyen of English football writers. He wrote the script. I think it was Joss Ackland, the actor, who delivered the lines. But, the references to Haiti is like, references to sort of voodoo and stuff like that, real portrayal of sort of Africans in a very sort of disparaging or sort of unusual way, or Central Americans, because that was the the story of how Haiti qualified in itself is remarkable, because they were also under a dictatorship at the time, and they qualified at the expense of Trinidad and Tobago, who apparently were the top team in CONCACAF at the time, and they lost. But for some reason, all the playoffs took place in Haiti. They got the honour, and the local dictator was pretty intent on Haiti qualifying. So the description of their win over Trinidad and Tobago was a 2-1 victory, where Trinidad had 4 goals disallowed, and a couple of other dubious decisions, shall we say. And I think the top scorer in all of qualifying was a guy from Trinidad and Tobago called Steve David, but they weren't winning that game. But then Haiti themselves went to the finals. And there is a story around their game with Italy and stuff we might touch on. But again, they were under massive pressure from a regime back home. Zaire were under pressure from a regime back home. So really, like the footballing story of this final ran in tandem with just a real time of political change that actually was sort of seeping into FIFA as well too.
This was months before the Rumble in the Jungle. Mobutu from Zaire was keen to get the kind of the cult of personality beyond his landlocked country in Africa, the Congo, up to West Germany, and they'd advertise, and he paid for advertising. And there was that thing where the Joseph Mwepu Ilunga was the guy who faced the free kick against Brazil, left the wall and just kicked the ball away.
Well, this is an incredible story, really. Yeah. Sorry, Dan. Yeah, like this is, as Dan pointed out to me earlier on, John Motson actually was speaking about this game years and years later and still didn't know the context behind this. And when you look at this and you look at an African team in the World Cup, like there are so many kind of racial things that came out of that free kick that were so wrong. And you mentioned the dictator. Essentially, he'd offered all the players like all these luxuries for qualifying for the World Cup. And Mobutu had a really, really key role in Scotland actually not qualifying, because that group was essentially Zaire and 3 teams who were going to beat them. And it was going to be decided on goal difference, which kind of is probably one of those situations that compelled the change in terms of head-to-heads over goal difference. But the reasoning here is just so utterly bizarre that it kind of needs explaining. So the Zaire players, after the initial game, which was a 2-0 defeat to Scotland, they were told that basically they weren't going to get the rewards that they were offered. They went absolutely mad. They lost their second game in an absolute landslide. So the Scots were obviously now down on goal difference. Their manager made some really strange decisions in the game. I think he brought on a 5'4" second choice goalkeeper. But that free kick, the Brazil free kick, which basically to us looks like, these uneducated, stupid Africans, what are they doing? They don't understand the rules of the game. It was actually quite profound what happened there, in that they were really, really afraid of going back to Zaire under that regime, and they were essentially trying to kill time and get the least worst result out of the game, which at the time I think was 3-0. So they weren't kicking the ball away because they didn't understand the rules like some kids who'd never played the game before. They were kicking the ball away because they were petrified of Mobutu.
Yeah, and they went home in disgrace then, basically. But as Johnny says, they had the threshold in that game was 3-0, and they basically were told they couldn't return home if they lost by any more than 3-0. So that free kick was with 15 minutes to go. As Johnny says, he belted the ball away, and it did kill some time. They got the minimum result. They were allowed to go home, but Mobutu at the time, and you touched on it there, John, like Mobutu at the time lost interest in football afterwards. Some of the players died in poverty or, pretty grim situations. But as you say, he lost interest in football and threw all of his energies into getting a pretty big boxing event into his neck of the woods. And sure enough, he did with the Rumble in the Jungle, as you say. And that was the story of Zaire's World Cup journey. It was completely warped. And I mean, the situation with Haiti, I mean, we're on the team, so the both of them are probably linked together. Like, it's not dramatically different in that there was a dictator at the time. I'm trying to think of his name. He was a young guy. He was like Baby Doc, I think was his name. Claude Duvalier. Yeah. That was it. Yeah. And again, like, they all had sent delegations with them to the finals to monitor them. And Haiti started off by scoring a goal against Italy, which was absolutely extraordinary because Italy came into this tournament as big favourites. Dino Zoff was the goalkeeper. They hadn't conceded a goal in 2 years. And there was this sense that there was this sort of invincibility around Italy. So they play Haiti in the first group match, and incredibly, they fall behind after half time. A guy called Emmanuel Cannon, I think it was, who scores. Now Italy go back and win 3-1. But, Haiti then go on and they don't make much progress. But significantly during the tournament, they had a player who failed a drug test. And this became a source of, massive controversy, of course. And the player was essentially taken out because the Haiti had sent a member of the militia to the finals with them. And the description, I read a piece earlier on, the vice president of their FA, was also the commander of an elite battalion of the army. And he basically took the player. The player was taken from the team hotel, beaten up and flown home to Haiti. And the players didn't know what had happened to him, to the point that he actually had to ring them before their last game to assure them that he was alive, because they had enough reason to believe that he mightn't be, given the regime at the time. So, I mean, this was a quite significant subplot to the tournament, and both teams went out. I mean, Haiti made their mark in the sense that they scored against Italy. They still lost the game, but the players were sort of playing under a pressure that you just can't even imagine what it's like to think that this could effectively cost you your life if things go badly.
His name was Ernst John Joseph. I'm looking at some text here on 53106. Patrick Cronin, West Germany losing to East Germany in the group stages, but it's still going on to win the cup. It seems the West German camp was falling apart after that. Beckenbauer did Trojan work to get them back together for the latter stages. I'll go through the reasons for that in a moment. Danny Losty, I was there and saw Poland play Sweden, Yugoslavia and West Germany. Against West Germany was the day they brought the fire brigades onto the pitch to clear the rain off the pitch. Sean Reynolds, a 10-year-old me, the Scots Zaire and the numbers peeling off the shirts. Didn't they break the wall from the free kick? Yeah, we just talked about that. Cruyff and that turn. High Chap 74 World Cup, the great Adidas Telstar ball. Scots were only unbeaten team, East beating West Germany, and Cruyff was wearing a different jersey to the rest of the Dutch team. That's from Mark and Tala. The reason why he was wearing a different jersey, Mark, is because he had a deal with Puma at the time, and Adidas sponsored the Dutch shirts. So he refused to wear the 3 stripes. He would only wear 2 stripes because when they said, why won't you wear it? Well, because it's my head in the jersey. It's not that I'm fed up with the total football nostalgia, but the German team won the 72 Euros, won the World Cup in 74, and were only a Panenka away from winning 3 major competitions in a row. Muller was a phenomenal striker, and Beckenbauer, one of the greatest players ever. Rainer Bonhoff, a personal favourite. Respect where respect is due. That's from Aaron. Lads, the Scots, it's so Scottish that they would not lose a game in the tournament, the only team not to lose a game, and they still wouldn't qualify from the group stage.
Well, to be fair, I definitely would give them the benefit of the doubt on this, because they were in a situation where, and this kind of shows why the head-to-head, it probably is a better solution in games like this, in the sense that they were probably came off the pitch after the Zaire game, and their coach was very disparaging about Zaire at the time. He more or less said, if we don't beat these, we can go home. They had, obviously, this is a good Scottish side, but they won the game 2-0. They went out on goal difference, but the Zaire thing was just so ridiculous after that. Like, if Scotland were playing Zaire in the last game or the middle game of the group, you'd have to think they probably would have qualified, and they were in a pretty decent group as well if you took Zaire out of it. So there is that element of kind of Scottish inevitable tragedy about it, but I'd certainly give them the benefit of the doubt on this. They're in with Yugoslavia and Brazil, and they go out in goal difference basically because Zaire were afraid of their president after the first game. Danny
McGrain from Celtic, Joe Jordan from Leeds at the time, and Dennis Law in the Scottish team, and Kenny Dalglish as well.
Yeah, you can see the one goal, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, a hell of a, and as we always say that there's always a story of Scottish misfortune whenever we talk about them in a tournament, but it's probably not as pronounced a failure as other ones. As you say, it's more the regret of not hammering Zaire perhaps as they were expected to. But I mean, they built themselves up for a fall at other times, maybe in a bigger way. I mean, the significant thing about this World Cup, of course, from maybe and more so from a Scottish perspective, is that England weren't in it. Which was, this was not a standard thing. I mean, I know we had our experience, I guess, in 1994, when we had the eyes of these islands probably focused on our team because we had qualified. But to have no England there, the famous failure against Poland in '73, and again, it's perception about things. We're so influenced by English culture and English programs and so on that we would have grown up. And I mentioned earlier, I tweeted out about that Zaire free kick. It was in the blooper reel, and as John says, it was like, look at these crazy people. And probably that England-Poland game in '73. and it was through the eyes of the English media and Brian Clough, where the goalkeeper, Tomaszewski, the Polish goalkeeper, was like portrayed as this clown. And I guess I probably just assumed growing up that, well, Poland had fluked their way into the finals at the expense of England and like weren't that good, when actually Poland went to the finals and went very far into the tournament and basically ended up in a semi-final with West Germany, albeit it was all groups to determine the final. But the decisive game, and he was a proper keeper in that competition, and they nearly went all the way. But I would assume in this part of the world at that time, England not being in it was an absolutely massive deal.
Yeah, it was the match of the day era, wasn't it? And the ITV era, and you had Brian Clough going to ITV, and ITV trying to compete with Brian Moore and match of the day.
The Polish clown.
And they had a key player, Lubansky, who wasn't available. Robert Godocha and Gregor Lato were stars of the tournament for the Poles. And it's funny, like how that kind of works out.
And the group stages were mad, though, John. I mean, like, to be in a group, Ireland were in a group with France and the Soviet Union, and basically that was it. I mean, just bizarre stuff. And then even the format of the World Cup itself, and that you went to, I think they had 3 of these where you went to a second group stage. Like, I just find that completely insane.
But when you think about it, though, Johnny, like, there's 55 countries in UEFA now, but if you have USSR and Yugoslavia being 2 countries, like, that's you sort of take most of the rest of them out of it, So that, I mean, that is the thing, even with Euro 88 qualifying with ourselves and so on. Like, we do sometimes talk about how elite it was back then, but there also just was a smaller field because USSR just covered everyone.
East Germany never consented to another game with West Germany after beating them 1-0 in the group stage. Their only World Cup, Jürgen Sparwasser with a goal in a 1-0 win in Hamburg. It was a kind of a theory at the time that the West Germans took the foot off the gas a bit to avoid the Dutch in the second group stage. Helmut Schön, the manager, was from Dresden. And I suppose, lads, what are we going to talk about first, the Dutch or the Germans?
Well, I mean, just to finish on maybe the East Germans, because the goal scorer whose name you mentioned there, like, obviously, again, we go back to the political thing, but he spoke years later. There was suggestion that maybe, this win, like, he would have been bestowed, great wealth would have been bestowed upon him because of this, because of this famous win that would have been sort of used by the regime for whatever reasons. But he actually ended up defecting to the West in 1988, 2 years before everything changed. So clearly, for those East Germany players, it didn't change their life in any respect either. But I don't know where you want to go. I mean, it does seem, and maybe I'm just influenced by watching the film, that the whole story is told through the prism of the Dutch, and in fact that whole official film, like, most of it is taken up by the final, and clearly the rivalry between the two. I mean, there was still, as Johnny said earlier, like 30 years on from the war, when you think we're on about Italia 90 nostalgia, and it's the same part back in history, the same distance back. So really, it's very fresh in the mind. So I don't know. I mean, that German side, maybe we'll talk about the German success and then maybe the Dutch failure. But as you say, like, I was struck. I mean, I don't know if anyone listened to John Giles during the week speaking about his rest of the world.
While you're on that, I think we have the video here of John Giles naming his best 11 that he ever played against on Thursday Night Show. And here's why he rated Franz Beckenbauer so highly.
So, who are the other 2 then in the back 4?
The other 2 in the back 4 are Daniel Passarella.
Passarella, the Argentinian, yeah.
Argentine guy. And, of course, has to be Franz Beckenbauer.
Automatic in the heart of that defence.
Oh, what a player. What a player, Nathan. He started off as a midfield player, as most people would know, as a midfield player, and he dropped into the back. And he was unbelievable. People, I played against him, and people say, like, because when he got on the ball, he always had loads of room, Nathan, and looking up, and could distribute the ball 30 or 40 yards. I remember somebody saying to me, whatever you get stuck into him, you get close to him, get it. And he's like all great players. They give you 2 choices, Nathan: a bad one and a terrible one. And in Beckenbauer's case, you see, if he was doing what he was doing, if you really tried to run at him, he'd just jog past you with the ball.
Right.
So the best thing you could do was let him have the ball. That was the best thing you could do. It wasn't a great thing. That was the only choice you had. It was the best choice. And from there, you see, you find with great players, they don't need 10 yards, Nathan. He only needs 2 or 3 yards. So he's looking up, right? And if anybody remembers Beckenbauer, there's always a picture. I have a picture in my head. He's looking up. He has the ball. He's looking up and see what he's going to do with it. Right? So if you made a dash at him, he just jogged past you. You'd be gone. So you had to let him do. No, all he needed was the 2 or 3 yards to distribute the ball. He didn't need an awful lot of room. And he was quick as lightning, Nathan. He didn't look it, because he was sort of jogging around most of the time, had all the room in the world. And he was like 2 players. I used to describe him like 2 players. When he had to defend, he was excellent, right? But when he had a chance to come forward, he was like a midfield player. And what he would do, when he got it at the back, and he'd come back and he'd go past the player, the thing is with Beckenbauer, I don't ever remember him losing the ball. So he'd distribute the ball, and then when his team was on the attack, he could drop back into defence. So it was like 2 players. He'd go back, come into midfield, do his stuff in midfield, distribute the ball, and then drop back into the defensive position. He was absolutely brilliant. Mostly on his right foot all the time. I know him never kicking the ball with his left foot.
Right.
But he had so much time and space, he could get it onto his good foot all the time and really distribute.
I think what John says is very interesting there, guys, because this total football obviously was perfected by the Dutch and Rinus Michels and Johan Cruyff. But the Germans played great football. They won the 72 Euros, and it was described by L'Equipe as football from the year 2000 when they beat England in 1972 at Wembley. So this didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's really, really enjoyable listening to John Giles just talking about these players. Giles is nearly 80. He's 80 this year, and the way he talks about Beckenbauer was kind of as if the game was yesterday. And watching that game, Ireland against the Soviet Union, watching Giles and Brady in midfield the other night was an unbelievable thrill. I couldn't get over it. And the way he speaks about Beckenbauer obviously, the good players just make time on the ball. And that, if you're watching the video of Cruyff and Beckenbauer in that World Cup, Cruyff basically, Bertie Vogts was kind of trying to man-mark him a lot of the time. But if you get tight to a player like that, he's just going to... It's not that he's necessarily electric pace, but over 5 yards, he's just going to do you with a little burst. And he basically has you in his mind as well. I wonder if the German team maybe was a little bit more united with Beckenbauer as a real spiritual leader. I mean, you mentioned that nonsense about Cruyff and the stripes and all that. Maybe there was more of an element with the Dutch team of Cruyff and the other 10, whereas, the German team had Beckenbauer, but they also had Gerd Muller, whose goal-scoring records is absolutely off the charts, and his own goal was probably typical in the final of his kind of career, the way he scored real poacher's goal. But I know you played it down a bit, John, earlier on in terms of the hatred between the two, but I probably would say that it was there. The Dutch were really, really raw after what happened, and going back there, and I'd say it was a horrible defeat for them in the final. But effectively, I'd imagine they were the 2 teams of the tournament, and the rest didn't really count.
I think the hatred came afterwards. I think it came subsequently. But I think if Robbie Rensenbrink's ball goes into the back of the net in Argentina 4 years later, it's forgotten about. I think it's later on when they see the regret of the team not winning the World Cup, then it begins to kick in the late 80s and the early 90s. To go through the Germans, they had a camp north of Hamburg, like a prison. There was a huge amount of security paranoia in Munich at the time after the terrorist attack on the Israelis in 1972 at the Olympics. So they were almost like Rustenburg in the English. They were in that camp. They weren't happy. They didn't play well in the group stage. The players went to the brink over money, and Helmut Schön was ready to play a second string, and Beckenbauer effectively negotiated the money on behalf of the players and then took a more leadership role. But they're a team that they reached the 1966 final. 1970, they were probably unlucky with the refereeing decisions in the semi-final against Italy when they lost 4-3. They won the European Championship in 1972. They had Bayern Munich in 1974. 6 of the team played for Munich and played for Germany. You had Hoeneß, Beckenbauer, Schwarzenbeck, the keeper Meyer, Breitner and Muller. These were like a team that came through the tournament, didn't start well, but grew through the tournament and were a match for the Dutch in that they had experience, I think, that the Dutch didn't have. We're going to take a break in a moment, but I just think this narrative about the West Germans just being dogged and resilient and always finding a way is a little bit insulting towards them.
The line about Breitner, John, definitely. I mean, Dan mentioned Joss Ackland, but some of the lines he came up with in this World Cup film are quite notable. But the line about Breitner was, finally, Breitner of afro hair and left-wing opinion. So, like,
Yeah.
he was actually commenting on the, as Dan said about Perron, the right and the left, but he was well on top of his political brief anyway.
Yeah, we'll talk about Breitner after the break, I think, because he's worth a little segment in his own, I think. But
I met him at the Champions League final, the Dortmund-Munich game there a few years ago.
No way.
Oh, John, save that for
this
us.
This is up there with your Kinder surprise revelations.
He is one of the more fascinating characters of that German team, and I don't know if squeezing him in before the break will do him justice.
No, we'll get some texts.
There is definitely but it is interesting though, because I think we would talk about the Germany team a bit as well, that the unity that, like, I don't know if I would fully agree with Johnny about this description of where the German team more united, because Gerd Müller would even say that he didn't enjoy the 74 World Cup as much as 1970 because of all the friction there was at the start of the tournament. So there was layers to their success as well. It wasn't just all everyone rowing together after that initial dispute.
Speaking of Germany, which was West Germany, but now is Germany, the Bundesliga is back behind closed doors. Augsburg 0, Wolfsburg 1, half-time in all the other games as well. Borussia Dortmund, the closest challengers to Bayern Munich at the top of the table, leading Schalke in that Rhine derby by 2-0. It's Fortuna Dusseldorf 0, SC Paderborn 0, Hoffenheim 0, Hertha Berlin 0, and RB Leipzig 0, Freiburg 1. Just strange to be giving out those scores. That's the way we are at the moment. Well, remember the 1974 World Cup. I supported a wonderful Poland side who'd knocked out England, lost out in the semi-final to West Germany on a rain-drenched pitch, which meant their two brilliant wingers were stifled. Wonderful side, happy memories. That is from Dave in West Cork. And Dave, we'll be looking out for the Irish scorers, of course, in the Bundesliga throughout the afternoon. But Borussia Dortmund leading Schalke by 2-0. But we're speaking about 1974 with Dan and Johnny after this.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
Screen Time with John Fardy.
This week on Screen Time, I talked to director Jim Sheridan about Toby Maguire's dietary habits and coaxing Daniel Day-Lewis out of retirement. Mark Ryle is back with more movies and TV shows to enjoy during lockdown. Plus, funny woman Catherine Lynch on her favourite movie.
Screen Time with John Fardy.
With Elephant and Castle.
Listen and subscribe to the podcast now or tune in this evening from 6
on News Talk.
Afternoons are easy with InsureMyVan.ie, Ireland's low-cost van insurance specialist. Get your business back on the road with InsureMyVan's best price guarantee. For super savings, visit InsureMyVan.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
The COVID-19 pandemic has been hard for everyone and tragic for many. We have suffered loss of loved ones and loss of contact with family and friends. By working together, lives have been saved. Thank you. Because of your patience, resilience and solidarity, we are now ready to take the first steps on a careful phased reopening of our country. Here are the 5 main things you should know for Phase 1. 1. You are still advised to stay at home, with some limited exceptions, such as for essential shopping, medical appointments, or when caring for others. 2. Construction work can return, where it is safe to do so, and there is limited reopening of shops and outdoor amenities. 3. Some outdoor sports and social activity in groups of no more than 4 can resume, but only within your 5-kilometre zone. 4. There is now guidance about wearing face coverings in some settings, such as in shops or in crowded public transport. 5. Working from home where possible is to continue. The details of this first phase of the reopening of our country are now available on gov.ie/phase 1. As we open up society, following the guidance on washing your hands, social distancing, and respiratory hygiene will be more important than ever. Please stay the course. We're in this together. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
Lose yourself in a world of unbeatable telly with Now TV and enjoy the latest shows and movies. Witness deadly rivals struggling for ultimate power in Gangs of London, starring Colm Meaney. And explore a darker side to the movies in Tarantino's unmissable blockbuster Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So, why wait? Start your 14-day free trial today. Search Now TV. 18 plus, new customers only. Month passes auto-renew, terms apply. Right now, the lights in many of our favourite places have temporarily gone out, leaving many of us having to make do at home. At Energia, we'll be right there with you. we'll continue to supply Irish homes with 100% green energy, keeping the lights on for that temporary home yoga studio, home arcade, home coffee shop, home gym, home cinema, or whatever else might be helping you power through all this. Energia, the power behind your power.
At Bank of Ireland, we want our customers and colleagues to stay safe and well. Now more than ever, it's important to know that your financial well-being is our priority. We have a range of supports available for our personal and business customers with easy online applications. Our dedicated staff are working to support you. But if you're cocooning or self-isolating at home, you can now nominate a family member or trusted friend to do your banking for you. We're also giving a €1 million emergency fund to support our communities right now. To find out more, visit bankofireland.com. Take care. Bank of Ireland. Bank of Ireland is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
In these difficult times, many businesses are still very much open for business and still need to communicate with their customers. Radio can help. Right now, it's playing an even bigger role keeping people in Ireland informed and entertained. And the latest technology means that even with social distancing, radio ads can still be made and broadcast safely. Radio. Business as usual, even when it's not business as usual. For more information, go to newstalk.com/advertising.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.
Off the Ball.
Number one is Johan Cruyff of Holland, perhaps the world's greatest footballer, certainly the world's most expensive. He cost £900,000 when he went to Barcelona. Cruyff is 27.
Cruyff making ground to get himself under that. Oh, a beautiful dummy from Cruyff.
Now, with Zaire, Vidic can build on a basic gift of speed. Not for nothing do they call themselves the Leopards.
Well, what on earth did he do that for? And it's Zago! He's got the first!
He doesn't mind if they bobble in as long as they're going. There's far too many forwards trying to put a hole in the back of the net. Not him. He'll push them off the post and push them to the goalkeeper's legs.
Bonhoff, Müller, und 2-1.
Great montages from Richie McCormack on the World Cup of 1974, our World Cup revisited year today. Thanks for listening and watching. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock in the company of the football correspondent of the Irish Independent, Daniel McDonnell, and the broadcaster and the journalist, Johnny Ward. Remember, our football coverage brought to you thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. You can text us on 53106. You can tweet us at Off The Ball. We're streaming live as well. You can watch us on the Off The Ball social channels through Periscope on Twitter, through YouTube, through Facebook, and you can listen on the Go Loud app. Brilliant show once again, lads. That's from Niall and Tala. Niall, thank you so much for listening and watching. Great stories in sport and politics and culture. Well, it's got to be about the upheavals. It's got to be about the context of the time, not just the actual World Cup itself. Gareth on Twitter, guys, Holland only qualified ahead of Belgium on goal difference. What might have been. The World Cup is before my time, but the German side doesn't get its dues, I feel. Muller, 68 goals in 62 games. Beckenbauer, Breitner, Meyer, Overath, Bonhoff, all top players. 74 and 78 World Cups having no semi-finals was bizarre. That is from Tom. German dirty tricks before the final, reporting that the Dutch team had been up to extracurricular activities. Cruyff having to reassure his wife that it was nonsense in a phone call which went on till 4 a.m. the night before the final. Jack Taylor, a butcher from Wolverhampton, refereeing the final, giving 2 penalties. Paul Breitner was some fella, I think he was a Maoist, scored 2 penalties in 2 World Cup finals. That is correct from Tom. Well, he didn't score a penalty in the second one, but he did score, Tom. Anthony Ryan on YouTube. I really enjoyed the official video of the tournament. The final, fascinating. 2 great teams. Vokes did a job on Cruyff, who didn't cover himself in glory. Could easily have seen red. Thanks for doing 2010 last week. My wife is from Uruguay, and their journey to the final was exhilarating. With the semi-final, I became a die-hard Celeste fan as the hate swelled after the Ghana win. Lads, the Germans, we were just talking about them before the break, and it's funny that they didn't really have any more success for another 16 years when the country was united, but I just think sometimes it is when your back is against the wall and when you feel like you're being humiliated in a final, when you're going behind after 80 seconds, that sometimes your experience and your determination and your quality, which Muller and Meyer and Beckenbauer had, does shine through. Yeah, well, you mentioned they were the European champions as well, and the Euros probably wasn't as big a deal then. I mean, it was a smaller competition,
And, I think you'd remember a lot of the Euros winners going back. Maybe it's just an age thing, but you'd nearly forget there was a tournament, a Euros in between some of the World Cups when you look back over history. But the thing is, as I said, I mentioned that Gerard Muller interview, that he said he didn't enjoy the early stage of that tournament. They were under pressure. I think even the film, again, reference to the arrogant West German fans booing them when they didn't impress against Australia. And then the loss to East Germany that we referenced. And there was a suggestion that the players actually were quite active. I mean, Helmut Schön was the manager, but the players were involved in a debate over whether to play over at or Netzer, I think it was. And there was like a bit of player power or more player committee that had a role and insight into some of the team selection. So they sorted them out. But you had someone like Paul Breitner there, and we touched on him before the break, and your text message refers to him as like a Maoist. And this was a time when anyone who was, espoused any kind of left-wing views obviously would have been viewed as a complete, a threat to society. And now he would have been a bit of a character, to say the least. I mean, he had posed for a photo under a picture of Chairman Mao, I think, before. He always rebelled against the big money Nouveau Riche Bayern Munich, the club that he played for. He'd be given interviews, and I think there was a famous reference where someone said, what's your greatest wish, and it was, his answer was for the Americans to be defeated in Vietnam, and he was 21 at the time. He actually dodged a bit of military service and ended up out of football for a year. So he was like this rebellious figure who then actually, after winning the World Cup in '74, joined Franco's Real Madrid. And in the years that followed, maybe his reputation, he became more champagne socialist and maybe been viewed as someone who maybe practiced some of what he preached. But he actually ended up pretty much being exiled not long after the World Cup because of comments he made about, speaking of how he found national anthems boring. He didn't consider himself German or Bavarian. He was a complete sort of wild card, a complete sort of roguish figure in some respects, but he still was a very good player. And it sort of goes back to what you're saying, John, that they had great players all around the team, and at that moment in time it just all worked for them. It all clicked at the same time, and even if Muller didn't enjoy the tournament, he still came up with the key goals when it mattered. And in that final, we saw a lot of it in the film. There is obviously this story that Holland battered them in the game, and it was the one that got away. But Germany had a goal disallowed too, a 2-1, which was dubious, and they were ahead. And there was this story that seemed to be, and it was referred to, I think, in a couple of the texts, that maybe Cruyff was wound up by the referee, and tensions were high, and it got to the Dutch a small bit. Now, there was obviously still a bit of, wartime tension hanging over it. I mean, you had this situation where Van Hanegem, one of the Dutch players, he'd lost a good number of his family in the war. So it was still a bit raw. So I think there was that, maybe not a hatred between the players, but I think there was that, there was this edge hanging over the game. And you got this sense that maybe on the day, the West German side just handled it, they controlled their emotions a bit better. And it got the better of this Dutch side. It was their destiny, and didn't like it when things went against them.
I played at the top of the show because Florian Schneider, one of the founder members, died last week. And I remember reading an interview with the other founder member, Ralph Hutter, a while back. And he just said that West Germany had been completely Americanized between, say, 1946 and the mid-1970s. And Kraftwerk was German culture out of Dusseldorf. It was the first time that they really had German culture. And I always found that quite interesting, and maybe that's why Paul Breitner wasn't as popular, because it was quite an Americanized, this was the version through the Marshall Plan of how a Western democracy should be. And I found that quite interesting. The Dutch, so their first World Cup since '38. Barry Hulshoff was injured. Jerry Murin didn't decide to play. But the Dutch, when you look at their club teams, you had Feyenoord winning the European Cup in 1970, Ajax win 3 in a row, Rinus Michels at the beginning of the Ajax revolution there, and Johan Cruyff. And they have this concept of football called total football, which we all hear, whereas the defenders become attackers and the attackers become defenders, and it's all about space. And it's when you have the ball, you try to expand the pitch, and when you don't have the ball, you look to contract the pitch. You play a high line defensively. You look to play an aggressive offside trap, and then elements of that have seeped into Cruyff at Barcelona, Michel's Barcelona, Guardiola, possession game, having the ball, keeping the ball, and the Dutch had this football philosophy that really worked at club level, and then it worked with the national team when Michels took it over with a mixture of Ajax and Feyenoord players. And the reason why, I think Cruyff in the book said, his own book, that they were 5 years out of Uruguay, who they hammered Argentina, they beat the world champions Brazil with Neyskens, with Cruyff, and all these interchangeable players. And I suppose one of the tragedies for the Dutch is that they're such brilliant footballers, but they couldn't get the job done.
Yeah, I wonder, was the total football slightly their downfall in the final? That, you know, Muller's goal was poor in the sense of where it came from. Could have been defended an awful lot better. But I mean, this philosophy was years ahead of its time. So many elements of it now would be seen as kind of, I suppose, normal. And when I think back, when I was younger, going to Gaelic games, matches in the summer, and, you know, the 15 players lined out literally exactly as they were in that team, and that was the way for so long, and it was just considered completely normal. So for the Dutch to be bringing in this philosophy, and it's still something I think that modern coaches, Arsene Wenger was probably a big exponent of it, and that changed the culture a bit in England as well, in that he would allow defenders freedom even in normal play to just creep into positions. And it's a big thing in the coaching manual now, when there's so much opposition analysis done of each team. So if you can get like a centre back, say a lot of teams now are playing, will say they've a free centre back. So if you can have a centre back who can kind of ghost into opposition positions, there's every chance he's not going to be marked, because nobody really knows who to mark. So the Dutch had this idea that your position wasn't really set in stone, and you can basically adapt to the position at that time. It kind of sounds almost like a game of Astro or whatever, but it was amazing. But I wonder, maybe in the final, was it a combination of the fact that it did have some failings, and as Dan mentioned as well, obviously Cruyff, you know, mentally wasn't, he was probably gotten at in that final, but they were the winners of the tournament in many ways, not only for their football, but also for their jersey.
There's always a jersey team with Johnny, really, isn't there?
Is it me though, Dan? Is it like when you look at these old tournaments, like the jerseys, like are any of them beyond like any sort of?
I know, but like some people are just jersey enthusiasts, and I just go, that's a nice shirt, but I wouldn't labour on it, you know. I wouldn't labour. They all look pretty good, but
this Dutch was truly iconic, to be fair.
It was, but there is this whole thing though. There was a best-selling book in Holland in 2004. Which basically tried to tackle maybe some of the Dutch feelings about that tournament. And I can't remember what the book was called. I was reading about it earlier. But basically the gist of it was, we deserve to lose the final, you know, and we need to lose this sense of, you know, that they were the moral winners of the tournament in some respect. And the argument was that they weren't, you know, that actually that they self-destructed, and they had to accept some responsibility for what happened. And it's striking, the author of it, then I read an interview with OK Coach, I think he was called, who gave an interview not long ago, where actually like spoke about the 74 team, that actually for all that they were, you know, this beautiful total football side, they also could be quite mean and cynical. They committed quite a few fouls. Like, they had a streak to them. But there does seem to be this overriding sense that, like, they were this brilliant side. I mean, they weren't conceding, they were hammering everybody. But that complacency did set in. I mean, you referenced there was a text there to do with the Cruyff phone call with his wife on the eve of the final, and it was Bild, the German tabloid, who did have this story about like a naked pool party with a couple of
what other pool party is there, Dan, to be fair? Well,
I mean, you could go have a pool party with clothes on, but I take your point. But anyway, it definitely wasn't their families that were there with them at the naked pool party. But even, you know, reading, I think it was a David Winner or some of the depictions of that time, that actually there doesn't, I mean, you can dispute the details, but there's no real dispute that, you know, that the Dutch team might have been engaging in some hijinks around the tournament. Like, Rinus Michels went home. I couldn't believe this. He was the Barcelona manager at the time, and they had the Spanish Cup final. So he actually went during the tournament back to manage Barcelona in a cup final, and then returned. But the players, once they got Brazil out of the way, for whatever reason, they seemed to take their eye off the ball a bit. And maybe there was you know, there was a bit of activity around the hotel, and they felt that this was their moment, that like they were a real free-spirited team, you know, even in terms
But imagine the Dam at the time as well, like Dan. Like, imagine being in Amsterdam around then, like in the early 70s. Like, they look like they'd just come out of, I don't know, just the streets, and they're all chilled out. They got necklaces on, long hair. You know, these guys had it going.
Listen, it would have been an interesting time to be there, I would have thought. And, you know, we talk about the Zidane movie that was made. I mean, you know, following him on the pitch, I think there was one met a Cruyff in 72, and he was this, you know, he was an artist, you know, as much as he was a symbol of that, as much as he was of football. And but for whatever reason, like they just got caught up in their own hype. And even the final themselves, like the final itself, I mean, they scored after a minute.
Germans didn't touch the ball.
Germans hadn't touched the ball. It was a foul, and again, it's just like, well, this is us. This is our moment. But and I don't know. I mean, the official film is weird, right? Because for some reason, clearly Holland had consented to having some
James Bond music.
Camera. Yeah, well, the camera crew following them around. So, like the start of the movie is the Dutch players on the team bus after the final, with like Cruyff being cradled by his wife. I mean, they probably weren't even.
I thought that was the plane. I didn't know the context behind that, but I mean, they really were very, very intimate.
Well, but now we know that Cruyff was actually. They were still having a discussion about the phone call the night before. They mightn't even have been talking about the match. You know, they were sorting out these issues from earlier on, but. Not even to be flippant about it, but it was obviously really bizarre, just a different time, that even during the game, the FIFA film was with the Dutch wives. Like, it was, you know, these bizarre references. Oh, their makeup starting to run now. They're looking a bit stressed here. You know,
God, it's so different nowadays, Dan.
Sorry?
It's so different nowadays.
Well, the wags, I don't know. I don't know if FIFA would make the wags the subject of their official film.
Also the music, like every time they would laser in on a Dutch player, you get this kind of dreamy James Bond style music. It's like The Spy Who Loved Me, or you're going to expect Jaws and Roger Moore to come out of it. You know,
they clearly decided that Holland were going to win. Like the production meeting, it was like Ronaldo in '98. Like, the story was written that they were going to win. And that was it. And even the references throughout the script of the arrogant Germans and this and that. It was like, this was meant to be Holland winning.
This would be the opportune time to bring in the Micheál Murphy, father of Nathan Murphy, view on the World Cup, which we have every Saturday. And his comment is, just my memory is the Dutch and being absolutely sick that they were beaten in the final. So there you go.
Yeah, well, they played brilliant football throughout the tournament. Dismantled Argentina, like 4-0, I think it was. They beat the world champions Brazil, who resorted to physical play. 2 brilliant goals, Naiskens and Cruyff, and the Cruyff turn earlier in the tournament against Sweden. They played fantastic football.
The one thing maybe about Brazil, JD, and again, we're kind of rushing for generalities here, but they couldn't have been suited by the conditions. It was like bizarre weather and like, was it the Germany-Poland game where again, Ackland was on about Wagner being played over the loudspeakers, but the pitch looked unraceable, not to mind unplayable, and there just seemed to be so much rain in that tournament, and the Brazilians, you know, I might be giving them a bit of a free pass here, but those teams have the Southern Hemisphere teams have a shocking record in Europe for one thing, but I doubt they were suited by the conditions at the tournament.
But I'm not going to go into the global warming team, but I remember the Euro 2008 was the first tournament I was at, and there was a semi-final in Switzerland that was similar. You know, the high temperatures can lead to some sort of volatile weather and so on. I should mention as well, of course, the Germany-Poland game and 3 other games, we had this utterly bizarre minute silence during the match as well, because the Argentina president, Joan Perón, you know, people have, you know, remember the movie with Madonna and whatnot, Don't Cry for Me Argentina, and Evita. It was the husband who passed away, and they had a minute silence during the match. So like, there was a pause in play, and they just and FIFA never really explained why, like, they were placing this leader on such a standing, this world leader on such a standing, that they were going to, you know, cease, you know, everyone, you know, stay where you are for a minute and like look solemn during the game because of the Argentina leader passing away. Okay. Very, very bizarre. FIFA,
I love the way we haven't gotten Maradona in, but we did get Madonna in.
Yeah, well, we've spoken about Maradona, I think, every week for the last 100 weeks. Just the Bundesliga scores: Augsburg 1, Wolfsburg 1, Borussia Dortmund 4, Schalke 0, Fortuna Düsseldorf 0, SV Paderborn 0. Hoffenheim 0, Hertha Berlin 2 and RB Leipzig 0, Freiburg 1. This is Off the Ball Saturday on 1974, the World Cup. We're going to talk about that and the rest of football after the break and after the news.
Sign up for News Talk Extra, our email newsletter straight to your inbox. newstalk.com/extra.
QuoteDevil.ie can save you money on your car insurance, van insurance or home insurance. Quote Devil Home Insurance is so easy. Get a quote in just 60 seconds and purchase cover in 3 minutes.
The Quote Devil's always got one hell of a quote.
Quote Devil Limited is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Oak Park. Real rashers rediscovered. From American-style streaky to our turkey rashers.
You could start an online comedy course. Or you skip that and quickly go to Choosy from the Irish Independent. Choosy.ie is a new price comparison site where you could find a better deal for your gas and electricity in a few quick clicks, saving you more than €400 a year. Always a crowd pleaser. Choosy, you have nothing to losey. Visit Choosy.ie. Research by the Commission for the Regulation of Utilities showed the average Irish household that switched their dual fuel tariffs every year saved €1,696 over 4 years. Terms and conditions apply.
While we need to stay apart for now, the team at the Europe Hotel and Resort Killarney looks forward to welcoming friends old and new when the time is right. The epic mountains, stunning lakes and the Kingdom of Kerry will be here waiting for you, and so will we. Our thoughts and gratitude are with the brave people on the front line, striving to make Ireland a safer place. From our team to yours, thank you. The Europe Hotel and Resort Killarney. A stay with us stays with you forever. Visit theeurope.com.
Every day on News Talk, we talk to hundreds of thousands of people right across the country. We're doing it right now. But we don't just talk to them, we talk with them. We challenge, we entertain, we inform, we engage. News Talk listeners are in the know, and our advertisers are too. Want to be part of the conversation? Talk to us today and discover how advertising on News Talk could work for you. Email advertising@newstalk.com.
Romeo's have been providing home deliveries to families for the last 25 years, and we continue to serve freshly cooked hot food to families in our local communities. Romeo's is the delivery expert. We have industry-leading delivery equipment and the best systems to get food to you fast and hot. Order your home delivery online now at romeos.ie. Thank you.
This is an urgent appeal from Concern Worldwide. As COVID-19 severely disrupts food supplies and the UN warns of multiple famines, the world's poorest people are at risk of dying of hunger. Concern is on the ground providing emergency food to families, but we urgently need your help. Please visit concern.net today to give what you can. Thank you.
The COVID-19 pandemic has been hard for everyone and tragic for many. We have suffered loss of loved ones and loss of contact with family and friends. By working together, lives have been saved. Thank you. Because of your patience, resilience and solidarity, we are now ready to take the first steps on a careful phased reopening of our country. Here are the 5 main things you should know for Phase 1. 1. You are still advised to stay at home, with some limited exceptions, such as for essential shopping, medical appointments, or when caring for others. 2. Construction work can return where it is safe to do so, and there is limited reopening of shops and outdoor amenities. 3. Some outdoor sports and social activity in groups of no more than 4 can resume, but only within your 5-kilometre zone. 4. There is now guidance about wearing face coverings in some settings, such as in shops or in crowded public transport. 5. Working from home where possible is to continue. The details of this first phase of the reopening of our country are now available on gov.ie/phase 1. As we open up society, following the guidance on washing your hands, social distancing and respiratory hygiene will be more important than ever. Please stay the course. We're in this together. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
Get the latest News Talk podcasts at newstalk.com and on the News Talk app. On 106 to 108 FM, on newstalk.com, on smart speaker and on the News Talk app. This is News Talk.
It's 4 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Burke. The Health Minister says it will be up to his legal advisers as to what punishment people will face if they break self-isolation rules after coming into the country. People are required to fill out a form saying where they'll quarantine themselves for 2 weeks. But a third of people who came through Dublin Airport up to the middle of last month didn't bother. Health Minister Simon Harris says they haven't made a decision about fines yet.
I do think it's important to put it on a legal footing, because I think it sends out a very, very clear message to anybody thinking of going on holidays that if you do, you're going to have to self-isolate for 2 weeks when you come back. In terms of how we'll enforce this, that'll be a matter for the Attorney General's office.
Emirates says it could be a year or even 18 months before its flight schedule can get back to normal at Dublin Airport. Dubai's national flag carrier used to fly out 20,000 passengers every month, but now runs just 2 cargo flights a week. The Boeing 777 jets fly out 35 tonnes of Irish produce to the Gulf and Southeast Asia and usually return with PPE from Japan. The Irish country manager for Emirates, Enda Corneal, says most of the airline's business is now cargo, not passengers.
In the last week, we've started a bi-weekly cargo operation. So a Boeing 777 aircraft, each carrying 35 tonnes of Irish produce to Dubai, Asia, Australia and so on, and then importing PPE from mainly Japan.
Around 40 scrap cars are on fire at Silo Green and Ballymun in Dublin. The blaze can be seen across the city, which led to multiple emergency calls at around 1:20 today. About 30 members of Dublin Fire Brigade are at the scene with 5 engines and a water tanker. People nearby are being advised to avoid the area and close all windows as this fire produces thick, toxic fumes. And Woody's DIY says children under the age of 16 will be banned from its shops when they open up again on Monday. The hardware retailer says staff are worried social distancing will be harder to achieve if children are let in. It says it will make arrangements for people if they get in touch using its website. It's 2 minutes past 4.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. For great value van insurance, go online to the aa.ie.
Mostly cloudy for the rest of the day with scattered showers. Rain and drizzle will push into the west and northwest later this evening, staying mild with top temperatures of 12 to 16 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.
Ja, Grabowski spielt auf. Bonus. Müller und 2-1.
This is Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock in the company of Daniel McDonnell from the Irish Independent and Johnny Ward, the broadcaster and journalist. Our football coverage brought to you thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net, where we're visiting World Cups every week. 1974 in West Germany, won by West Germany, with the Bundesliga on today behind closed doors, lads. The reason why I played that Gerd Muller commentary was I was just kind of almost getting emotional about it last night, just thinking about... Obviously, we're in a very strange situation, and I'm just thinking to myself, when are we going to have a situation where we're going to have like an 80,000-seater crowd, and that euphony and that sound that you just can't manufacture of stadiums when this is over, you know?
Here's one for the two of you. It was something that I put up, I think, on Twitter long before the lockdown. Who's the most valuable player in the world at the moment, and is it Haaland?
Well, it doesn't answer the question about crowds, though, John, is it?
Well, Haaland is the future, Dan. Crowds, God knows where that's going to go, but is he the most valuable player in the world?
Well, I mean, he might be. I mean, he's the most talked about player in the world today because most people are probably watching the Borussia Dortmund game. But, yeah, I mean, I'm to return to John's initial point, I mean, it is there's a crossover if we're talking about 1974 here, and even... It's a bit strange, even like looking at all these. We're looking at great World Cups every week, and these amazing crowd shots and scenes and all the stuff that now there's going to be an adjustment process to whenever they do return. And I do think things will return, and I'm not going to get too dramatic around that. But at the same time, it is a sort of a massive it might take a while to adjust to that completely, and
it's just about not taking it for granted, I suppose, is that kind of thing.
Exactly, and like even you look back at stuff from last year and 1 year ago now, and you're almost thinking, God, look at all those people close together. You almost have to retrain your mind to thinking that this is normal again. And I know that like everyone who is keeping an eye on the Bundesliga now, everyone is commenting on the atmosphere and how. There is no doubt that football without fans is completely different. I mean, it is still football. It is still where people started, playing with no crowd noise and kicking the ball around the place. And it's strange, but at the same time, it's something that we may just have to adjust to if we want sport back. I mean, football without fans is diminished, but no football is worse than that. And you kind of have to try and find a way to make it work, but we'll see. Like, it is like, as much as football has been played in other countries, I mean, Belarus just banged on without it, without any care or consideration, and come back in the Faroes last weekend and in other places. But there is no doubt that all the eyes of the world, the football world, are on Germany with this, because and will be over the next week or two medically, to see how it pans out, because what they are doing here. And I don't mean to be talking about it in sort of crass terms, because we're talking about something so serious, but it is an experiment for everyone, and maybe if it goes okay for them, maybe some fears that people have might be lifted, and it might turn out to be a very significant thing.
Hey, John, great show again this week. Thank you, with the World Cup reminiscing. But the best part is breaking away from the lads to give the live Bundesliga score updates. Imagine live sport back. Brilliant. That is from Pat in Kilkenny. Don't forget the big disaster during 1974 when Guinness were on strike and we had to watch it drinking Murphy's. That's from Paddy O'Brien.
That's not the worst. Not the worst thing in the world.
I didn't know about that, though. That is signifift. That is significant. Murphy's
lads, a pint of Guinness would be significant at the moment.
It would, John. It would. Yeah. It certainly would. If there's one thing I missed during this lockdown,
it's that. Great show again, lads. The Germans were the dominant team at the time, and in Gerd Müller, they'd probably the greatest goal scorer of all time. They should have won the final 3-1 as Müller, the goal disallowed, with the worst offside decision imaginable from James in Waterford. Very sad what happened to Gerd Müller. He's not been well in the last few years. He's had dementia. It's very sad to see what's happened to Gerd. I was just kind of thinking that, but when you hear the sound of a crowd at a big match, like a really big game, and there is a way the noise travels. Like, I remember Stephen Cluxton for Dublin against Kerry. Croke Park actually moved that day. I really kind of felt like the whole place shake. And guys, yourselves, have you been in that situation where you really feel, oh my God, like I'm actually being deafened, my ears have been deafened by this, and it is just the most spine-tingling experience, I think, personally, anyway.
I'd have to say that in many respects that would stick out to me more, just the atmosphere at a sporting event, almost more than what was happening on the pitch when you're at an All-Ireland final in Croke Park. Galway's first All-Ireland final in the last sort of 10 years when they played Kilkenny. The noise from the Galway fans that day, I'll never forget it. And being at games that, and I think this is maybe one of the problems with football at the top level now, that it ultimately doesn't matter as much in some respects, in that, when you look at these games from the past when it was a really, really proper working class game, and this was people's proper, lust for life on a weekend, it really mattered. My most memorable experience of a game was probably Galatasaray. Just went on holidays in Istanbul. Galatasaray playing Fiorentina in a friendly game, which was the best I could get, but never seen anything like it. I was absolutely blown away. I'd be interested for Dan's opinion, because I know he was at PAOK Shamrock Rovers back in the day as well.
Oh yeah, you were at Legia Warsaw, John, as well.
That was probably second to the Galatasaray.
Legia Warsaw, and people will have seen the displays that Legia Warsaw did, the amazing creativity of their fans and the artwork, and they were obviously involved in spats with Celtic fans who mightn't consider them. There's been various tensions around Legia Warsaw games in recent times, but when they played Dundalk in that Champions League game in 2016, I mean, it was their chance to get to the Champions League for the first time since it had been a group stage competition. The first time since it was called the Champions League that they could make a proper advance in it. And I mean, the crowd display was just amazing. And I mean, that's why it was so amazing when Dundalk silenced them for so long. PAOK Thessalonica with Shamrock Rovers would have played there in 2011. The the crowd, again, the sort of the atmosphere, the volume, the music, everything pre-match is exactly what football and football culture is about. And I suppose with Dortmund today, like people talk about the yellow wall as well, and like, as I said, it is wrapped up with the story of the game, and it is different. As much as I'm talking about the importance, where safe of possible, of trying to ensure that the sport remains active to some degree, it is still dramatically diminished. And like, they are the atmospheres that stand out for me. Like, I'm lucky to have been a lot of major tournaments, but the atmospheres of the major tournaments aren't the same, because they're slightly, you know, I was at a Brazil game in 2014, and yeah, like the host countries, when they're involved in tournaments, it can be special, but maybe just not. It's a bit more sanitized than a club game when you have the club supporters, and this is their existence. This
even
is
the
like,
club games, though, Dan. Even the club games, if you, I don't know, you probably haven't been to that many Premier League games because you wouldn't necessarily be working at it, but even the ones you're at, I'd be interested to know your view, because I've been totally underwhelmed by the games I've been at. Few at Anfield, been at St James's Park.
Have you been to Goodison Park?
Goodison always sounds great, but the Liverpool experience seems to be just a little bit like Old Trafford, kind of an awful lot of day trippers. I'm encouraged that Old Trafford's bringing in safe standing, but the Premier League atmosphere, like, if you think this is what it's about, it definitely isn't. Like, and you're on about Legia Warsaw, absolutely no comparison to anything I've experienced in England.
Yeah. I think I was at Southampton last year, Fulham. I mean, St Mary's is just like, it's just a stadium, and it's powerfully modern, and everything's absolutely fine about it, but it's just like, it's devoid of character completely. It's sort of like going to an outdoor cinema or something, you know. And like, it's fine, you know, like it fits the purpose, but it's different. Like, I'll be interested. John, did you go to Crystal Palace at some stage in recent memories? The older Premier League grounds, like Goodison Park, no doubt has that quality. And it's a bit like at home, like Dalymount and the older venues just have something about them.
Yeah, I would agree, lads, that, the Emirates to me is soulless. Old Trafford is the moon. The more atmosphere on the moon than Old Trafford. Twickenham, the moon. I still think Anfield has got something about it. And to me, it's more sometimes about the journey to the ground, the history of the ground. And Crystal Palace has got these big pillars, but Selhurst Park has still got a character to it. And they played Brighton, and it was a derby game that was good. Goodison Park, I'd agree with, is good. Saw Spurs whip Everton there 6-2 last season. That was brilliant. I should say I've been at Selhurst Park, and it was definitely the best. And like, it was amazing, JD. You were in these like wooden seats that you might see in Tune Stadium or something. I could not get over it. I was like, how is this a Premier League ground? And you have kind of the ultras like behind the goal they behave in a sort of a kind of a European style standard. But all these new grounds, and like, I've been to Coventry City's ground where they got rid of Highfield Road and they went out to some place like by a roundabout beside another roundabout. You had to drive to it. Like, it's modern, but like, ultimately you're not. If I were a kid going to these games, it's not going to wow me. Like, even like when I was young going to Terryland Park, 3,000 people in the stand, everyone standing up, the away fans one side, the home fans the other, like, atmospherically way better than anything I've experienced in the Premier League with 30,000 people there. It was just raucous, and it was proper terracing as well. And the move, as much as it was obviously born out of tragedies, the move to all-seater has really, really killed atmosphere at an awful lot of grounds. And, you know, I always find, like, if you're sitting at a game, you're kind of a spectator, whereas you're actually a participant if you're standing. Well, I think prices as well have got something to do with it. It's become a more middle-class game in England. I still think Anfield has it. I still think you'll never walk alone, puts your shiver down.
European nights, definitely.
Yeah, I think Anfield still has it. I think Goodison has it. But to me, the two memorable occasions for me of watching football for sound have been international matches. Russia beating Spain at the 2018 World Cup. Just that deafening sound of almost like locusts But that was a bit weird, though, John, wasn't it? I thought, because it wasn't. I think that Russia had there was an amazing noise. I was at that game. It was like an incredible noise. But I think Russia had actually sent a lot of their ultras off to Siberia for the tournament. You know, like, I think, you know, they were clapping at the wrong times. You know, like, so some of the people, like, you know, that were there, like, they got caught up in the excitement at the end, but it was a very different one. Like, you know, there was definitely a different energy around it. That I'm not sure. It wouldn't have been the dudes that were there wouldn't necessarily be heading to CSKA every week or Spartak Moscow. I still felt the deafening sound though in my ear, and I felt that as well when I saw Brazil win the Olympics in the Maracanã when Neymar scored the winning penalty. just the sound. It was 78,000 Brazilians. Just the sound. There's another level. And the Stephen Cluxton. There are decibels of this. We're getting quite technical, I know. But I suppose that's because we're missing it with the Bundesliga going on behind closed doors today.
It's one thing that the Gaelic game still has, and I found it's lost absolutely none of this. The atmosphere at a proper hurling game, is very, very hard to beat. And an Ulster football game with the two right teams involved playing in Clonus or wherever. The Gaelic game still absolutely has it, and that's one thing it hasn't lost despite its kind of move towards professionalism.
The most amazing sense of a crowd was the third game between Offaly and Clare and Semple in 1998. It was absolutely electric. You could actually feel the buzz. That is from Paul Carroll and Offaly. 53106, folks, the best atmosphere you've ever experienced at a sporting event. You can have great occasions that really only matter to the home fans. For example, Connacht beating Leinster on John Muldoon's last game. It was a disaster of a year for Connacht, but that was a great day. That is from Jason in Galway. Would agree with you, Johnny, about Gaelic games. Some of the Cork-Waterford matches. And Semple Stadium is real cauldron for that kind of stuff, and hurling as well. And the way hurling is constructed for it to be end-to-end and to be dramatic.
Yeah. It's a different type of noise, isn't it? Though? Yeah, I think it's more the ebbs and flows. Like, it's never intimidating.
This is Dan's anti-GA snobbery coming right into the floor again now.
No, but I'm just saying it's a different type of. I mean, like, that is it is the culture of it. It's less. It's not segregated. It's not as if there's like a sort of a cop as such. You know what I mean? It's more. Like it's people caught up in the back and forth and how the game can swing either ways, and there's that buzz of excitement and energy, whereas maybe some of the football ones we're speaking about is actually, intensity and like hatred, and a lot of things that fuel the atmospheres. It's a different type of it's a different type of fuel with it, I think.
Did you see the coverage of Ireland USSR from '74 Daily Mount? Like, as much as I was struck by how good Brady was at that stage of his life. Ireland's commitment to playing football was bizarre, considering how I've gotten to know this Irish team. They're playing the ball across the back. Maybe that was their downfall eventually. But the atmosphere at Daily Mount, I mean, it sounded like something I'd never heard before at an Irish football game. It was really, really intense, and I'd love to know any listeners.
You just
and some people did tweet in that they were at that game. I just looked absolutely.
Yeah.
Johnny, your link just froze there. You were delighted to hear any listeners what we were saying there?
Yeah, sorry, any listeners who were in the old Daily Mount or even at that game or games like from the 60s and 70s in Daily Mount, because there was probably a lot of regret as well that Ireland ended up moving to Lansdowne Road, which is effectively a rugby ground, and the old Daily Mount, if it were anything like that, must have been really, really special on a big day.
Well, I thought the Aviva Stadium really didn't have any atmosphere until the Germany game. That was some night. Like, you really could feel that people did raise it then. And I think, to me, like what for crowd noise, when the crowd is able to go up to a height, is when I can really feel it. And I felt that from the Russia-Spain game, and I felt that from the Brazilian Olympic win, and I felt that at Mexico beating Germany in the World Cup. They went absolutely mad. They were throwing plastic beer glasses just everywhere, which was quite fun.
Yeah, I think the problem with the Aviva, though, is that it's actually the exposed nature of one end of it, and like it's like Johnny mentions Daily Mount, and there was various famous Irish games through the 70s. That you see the old pictures of, like, it actually did breach probably every health and safety rule, and people sitting on the roof and whatnot. But that naturally creates like noise. And sometimes, as I said, the best atmospheres don't necessarily need to have massive numbers. It just needs people in a condensed space. And like, as I'm saying, some of these Bows Rovers games in Daily Mount now can be incredible.
We were at that game
noise and atmosphere.
The Dundalk game in Azerbaijan, what was there, like 5,500 people at that game? I thought that was amazing.
Yeah. It's just the noise, it's culture, but there is the Aviva, I think, is just it's so clean and modern and such a great stadium that there's the fans are never on top of the players. In fact, they often have the front couple of rows boxed off sometimes for UEFA games and so on. So it doesn't. You need something special to happen to create the atmosphere, whereas some places don't need anything to happen to create a special atmosphere, and that's the difference.
We're getting the listeners interacting with this on 53106 in the text messages. Add Off the Ball on Twitter as well. Tipperary's All-Ireland winning Croker 2010 epic drama with Shefflin, and the sound was unreal all the way through. Never forget it. That is from Katie up tip. Old Highbury, better atmosphere than the Emirates. Nice 30,000 contained crowd and stadium. That's from Tim. I think it might be a bit more, Tim, as well at some stage. Guys, you must never have been at the Den for Millwall game in the 70s. Tip versus Clare in an under-21 match in Ennis in 98-99. I think that was controversial. Best game for atmosphere when Bristol City beat Man United 2-1 in the Carabao Cup. Last-minute winner. Also Ireland-France in the 2015 Rugby World Cup. That is from Richard in Dublin. Another couple of things about the World Cup in 74, which was our year today. It was the first time they had the new trophy. And also, they had this weird thing in the film, if anybody's seen the film, where they had empty buses parading around the Olympic Stadium in Munich before the game. It was like, I don't know, it was utterly bizarre.
Like a Dublin bus from today.
It was terrific, yeah. So they had a parade, basically. Their closing ceremony was to bring in all the team buses. Now, obviously, in a couple of years' time, they won't be able to do that because there'll be 128 teams in the World Cup, and it'll create like a massive traffic jam or a smash of some description. But yeah, it was terrific. Like, and you had obviously in the German names, it was like Schottland for Scotland, which made me smile because that's what Trapp used to call them when he was Ireland manager. The new trophy as well. That's right, because didn't Brazil get to keep it after they won it in 1970, although they probably lost it and got melted down. Yeah.
In 1983, But I think if I was talking about the legacy of that World Cup, I think the legacy is that you don't actually have to win to be remembered and to be revered as the Dutch were, and actually changed the way football was played in some ways. Experience matters with the Germans, 66, 70, 72 and 74. Complacency is your enemy. I think in the final, the Dutch just weren't at the pitch of the way they were against the Brazilians in effectively what was a semi-final. FIFA, though, I think probably the biggest legacy is two things: Cruyff and the impact on football through not only Holland, but through Spain and Guardiola subsequently. And the second thing is the Germans' resilience. And the third thing for me, as you touched upon, Daniel, that FIFA, before it became quite murky, really changed with João Havelange, and the fact that it became much more commercial. They did all those deals with Adidas, with Coca-Cola, and with Sepp Blatter coming in. And you could argue that before it got murky and they lost the run of themselves, FIFA did a good job in terms of bringing the World Cup to different places, expanding the competition, getting more commercial sponsorship on board, and making it more modern.
Well, the two of them went hand in hand, though, John. That was the problem. I mean, they pretty much got this book fell. This Andrew Jennings book, which I was looking through it again this morning. I put it away somewhere. But I mean, unfortunately, like, it was Adidas, Horst Dassler, the Adidas sort of magnate, who basically the vote between Stanley Rouse and Havelange. I mean, he was in the background trying to figure out which horse to back, and inducements went with it from the start. So, like, FIFA, no doubt they did some good things, and we touched on it with South Africa, and the various programs they supported. But the expansion went together. I mean, even I mentioned that Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago one earlier on. Jack Warner was the Trinidad and Tobago FA and the CONCACAF figure at the time, and sort of maybe let some things slide for whatever reason that maybe he shouldn't have. As we touched on it in '66. I mean, old English FIFA, was very questionable politically, and probably some of its its view towards South Africa during apartheid and so on, and the African teams boycotting it. So there was no good FIFA really. They were both of their era, but the expansion was necessary. This whole thing of only one African team being able to play and all this, that needed to change, and it became a more global World Cup. But obviously, at the expense of some other things, and it's tainted. So it's bizarre. Like, football, unfortunately, is so political, and you can't avoid it. And the World Cup is often the perfect representation of that.
Well, if it's the world's religion, unfortunately, it's going to become political, isn't it? When people have to be in charge of it, and if it's not the fans, if it's not the public, that's the problem with it, isn't it? I do think the World Cup was very well organised in Russia in 2018, and I think you can't. The actual organisation of it, whoever the executives are, the people involved, I think they do the good job. The actual operations people. Text in here on 53106 on crowds, on atmosphere. Hi guys, Stephen Alkin here, the great Stephen Alkin. I was at the Soviet Union game in October 74. Slate grey skies, damp crowd, was subdued initially, although we all knew Liam Brady's debut would be interesting. It got better as the game went on. Soviets weren't up for it and we tonked them, but the game wasn't that good. The loudest crowd I ever heard was at Anfield when Liverpool beat Chelsea in the Champions League with the phantom goal in 05. That was loud. Lads was lucky enough to be in the Cop Anfield for a midweek league match last year. The whole Cop stood for the whole game. You're right, it does make you feel like a participant, not just a spectator, and You'll Never Walk Alone was great fun altogether from Barry and Bayside. Folks, the problem with the Aviva is the football we've had to watch on the pitch for 5 years. Good football will change it in 5 minutes. Dave, a season ticket holder.
Yeah, I think in fairness, if Ireland start playing like they did in that 74 game, I think the atmosphere will be just fine.
Go on.
No, I do take the point, but it's the quality of football at times didn't help, but like there is, the stadium still does have just one section of Irish fans that get together and make a bit of noise or whatever.
Mode section
behind the goal. They were populated by they had security near them for a good period of the last 10 years as well for whatever reason. But it's just harder to get it going. I mean, even if the football is good, it's still the wind, everything. It's just not a sound tunnel in the way that it might be.
53106 or at Off the Ball on Twitter. We're talking about atmospheres, crowds, great days in sport. We've just done this organically, and that's sometimes the best way to do it. Shelburne against High Split, amazing night, super atmosphere. Also John Tracy winning the World Cross Country in Limerick. I was 15, absolutely amazing. That is from John Kenny and Eden Derry. West Ham midweek fixture when Kenny Brown got the winner against Man United April 1992. It was crazy from Pat in Tullamore.
The old Talca Park. Talca Park hasn't really changed at all. But I was at a good few of the European nights when Shells were playing or Bows were playing or whoever was playing, and I don't think Dan will disagree with me on this. That place had a proper noise to it. It was rolled, it was half falling apart, but it was, it's a small enough kind of ground, and the noise kind of stays in because of the old structure of the roof or whatever. And that had your split game, Bows against Aberdeen, various Shells games that they played. Proper atmosphere, and I'm a bit sad for Shelburne that they're moving to Dalymount, because I think they're going to kind of forego a little bit of their identity, because Talca, as much as they move from Ringsend, Talca is Shelburne for some time now, and that old place, I've been at a couple of games the last while, it still has a lot going for it in terms of atmosphere and just a bit of passion really.
Ireland's match. Go on.
Yeah, that Hydrox split game, that is a good shout. I mean, I was there that night. It was extraordinary, the Dave Rogers goal. I even remember the excitement afterwards and thinking, God, could this be the start of something for Irish football? And we have these false dawns sometimes. Unfortunately, it wasn't, but it was a great night.
53106. Ireland's match against Italy in Dalymount in 1983 was amazing. People on the sideline, roof, even on the pitch. Paolo Rossi at his peak. Paul McGrath making his debut in Block Capital's magic moment. That is from Al in Wexford. Quality Street, Al. 1974, 13-year-old me watched Ireland and the Soviets line up for the anthems. The Soviets looked like bronze gods, all white with a CCCP across their shirts. Ireland looked pale and skinny. 40,000 of us were convinced we get hammered. 3-0, Given scored a hat-trick. The Soviets returned home and were replaced by Dynamo Kiev. That is from Kieran in Dublin. That's Lobanovsky, isn't it? John White on Twitter, the 2 minutes after St. Ledger scored against Italy in Croke Park was the best I've ever experienced, and then Italy scored and you could hear a pin drop. That is what sport is about, isn't it? It's Michael Lyon in 1991. It's Ireland against the All Blacks in 2013. Blew me on Twitter, lads. I've got to say, as an Englishman, the most unreal atmosphere, England-Scotland, Euro 1996, still makes my hair stand up just thinking about it. That was the day of the dentist chair and Paul Gascoigne, wasn't it, lads?
It was indeed.
It was indeed. That summer in England seemed like a time. All right, I'd imagine if you
were... I was there. It was great.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Oh.
What's your Euro 96 story, JD? You have to have one.
Well, the Paul Breitner, I got a photo with Paul Breitner and a friend at the Champions League final in 2013 when Munich beat Dortmund. That was great.
Do you have anyone from 96?
No, 96...
John, that's a laugh that suggests that you clearly do.
96 was the first time I ever got tired. 96 was the first ever time I got tired and emotional, and I had to be put to bed after about 2 hours of imbibing. And the only time ever I lost my legs being tired and emotional was in 1996, Euro 96. That was the only time, and it's never happened since.
You weren't on a dentist chair for the 2 hours previous? Or?
No, I just lost the run of myself. But I'll never forget, I remember missing a bus. I was working in a bank through college, and I missed a bus, and I had to throw my way or to walk back to my sister's house. And Everybody, the motorway was just got the English flags out. They were beeping their horns. There was a real buzz around England at the time. And we saw it in 2018 when they reached the semi-final. Well, I didn't see it, but you heard about it, that they got obsessed about it. And they were really unlucky in that tournament, England. They should have beaten the Germans in normal time and extra time, and then they got knocked out in penalties. But apart from the mad stuff they were doing in the tabloids and the front pages, it was a fantastic atmosphere in England in 1996. But I was too young, apart from the losing my legs and imbibing, I was too young to be getting into involved in too much chandeliers stuff, which came later. Celtic Park, unbeatable. Valencia came in 2001. We absolutely were scared them to death. It was the best. Anfield always, of course, was lucky enough to see them thrash Villa 5-0 a few years ago when Gerrard got his first hat-trick at Anfield. Special place, just a normal game, until he scored his third. And then he just exploded. I think, yeah, the Olympiacos game as well, folks. I would love to be at Anfield that night. I had a friend who was at Anfield in the Cop that night, and he said it was just unbelievable.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I haven't been at a Liverpool European night, so I'm going secondhand off the details of what it's like from people who've been there, and it does seem like, you know, the evening games and so on. There was a complaint a couple of years back. I think there was a complaint from some local Liverpool fans, and it was a big talking point at the time that they did feel there was too many sort of quote unquote outsiders getting, you know, buying tourist tickets for some of their home matches, and it was affecting the atmosphere. But I guess in some respects, the fact that they cared enough to make an incident over it would make it different in some respects from, you know, the Emirates and other places where it's become the accepted norm. And it's going to be the challenge with even Spurs and the new stadium. I know they've tried to make it more atmospheric.
That's good.
They've tried to devise it in a particular way, but it's still going to be hard over time in London to make it a... We'll see, you know.
That's good.
The more the reputation in the stadium grows, John, the more people are going to want to go and try it out, and that in itself can dilute the atmosphere.
Just to take us to the break, Cork City, Bayern Munich and Musgrave Park when Dave Barry rocked the Germans in 1991. Scorching hot day from Mike and Cork. And France-Ireland 2004, Stade de France when O'Shea nearly won it. The Ireland fans roaring along with La Marseillaise was extraordinary. I met Brian Kerr one Christmas Eve years later and thanked him for the experience, and he said, that was the night we won 0-0. That is from Luke. 53106. This is Off the Ball Saturday.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
On Alive and Kicking this weekend. Asthma in Ireland, the recent surge in COVID concern calls to helplines and advice on how to beat breathlessness. I'll be joined by Conor Crichton of the Dublin Boys Club and Artis Mazer to discuss healthy masculinity, and Andy Ramage of 1 Year No Beer shares everything he knows about motivation.
Alive and Kicking with Claire McKenna.
This Sunday from 9 a.m.
on News Talk.
Afternoons are easy with InsureMyVan.ie, Ireland's low-cost van insurance specialist. Get your business back on the road with InsureMyVan's best price guarantee. For super savings, visit InsureMyVan.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
At Guaranteed Irish, we believe enterprise is at the heart of thriving communities.
Like IE Domain Registry, home of .ie. The preferred online address for business in Ireland. Did you know that 81% of Irish consumers believe that buying Irish is important? Now is the time to support Irish businesses who've moved online while we stay safe at home. Guaranteed Irish welcomes companies that are altogether better choices for our communities, so look out for it. Stay at home with .ie and continue to support Guaranteed Irish businesses. Altogether better.
At Vodafone, we're making sure our network is the best it's ever been. We're now offering all our bill pay customers unlimited data. So that's unlimited sourdough starter searches. Unlimited, have you seen this? Followed by unlimited diagonal laughing emojis. Unlimited, you're on mute there, Aisling. And unlimited text, songs, quizzes, games, streams, laughs, pics, pods, scrolling, fundraisers, unlimited. You get the idea. Because even though we're apart, there's still unlimited ways to connect together. Customers can sign up on Vodafone.ie. Vodafone. Ready? Unlimited calls, texts and data subject to signing up to a Red Unlimited plan. See Vodafone.ie for full terms.
The COVID-19 pandemic has been hard for everyone and tragic for many. We have suffered loss of loved ones and loss of contact with family and friends. By working together, lives have been saved. Thank you. Because of your patience, resilience and solidarity, we are now ready to take the first steps on the careful phased reopening of our country. Here are the 5 main things you should know for Phase 1. 1. you are still advised to stay at home, with some limited exceptions, such as for essential shopping, medical appointments, or when caring for others. 2. Construction work can return where it is safe to do so, and there is limited reopening of shops and outdoor amenities. 3. Some outdoor sports and social activity in groups of no more than 4 can resume, but only within your 5-kilometre zone. 4. There is now guidance about wearing face coverings in some settings, such as in shops or in crowded public transport. 5. Working from home where possible is to continue. The details of this first phase of the reopening of our country are now available on gov.ie/phase 1. As we open up society, following the guidance on washing your hands, social distancing, and respiratory hygiene will be more important than ever. Please stay the course. We're in this together. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
The Lotto jackpot is an estimated €2.5 million. If you'd like to play any of your favourite National Lottery games from home, just download the app or visit lottery.ie. Play responsibly, play for fun.
They are the unseen and unheard of the COVID-19 story in Ireland. In this week's Sunday Independent, we go inside nursing homes in 3 counties and hear the residents' stories. Plus, don't miss an exclusive interview with Gabriel Byrne as he turns 70. Paul Kimmage writes about his 30-year war on drugs in cycling. Plus, Charlie Bird and Nell McCafferty tell us how they're coping in lockdown. The Sunday Independent. Real stories worth paying for, in print or subscribe at independent.ie.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
You are welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock in the company of Daniel McDonnell from the Irish Independent and Johnny Ward, the broadcaster and journalist. 53106 for your text messages. At Off the Ball is our Twitter handle. You can watch us as well on Periscope, on Facebook, on YouTube. You can listen to us on the GoLad app as well as News Talk. And for more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net, because our football coverage is brought to you with thanks to Paddy Power. And we're getting a lot of texts in here on the atmosphere of crowds and the best atmospheres and the best games you've been to in the wake of our discussion about World Cup 1974 and the brilliant atmosphere you had then in the Munich Stadium in the Olympic Stadium in Munich in Germany, in West Germany. And I suppose it's all relevant today because the Bundesliga is back behind closed doors and the matches are over. So Borussia Dortmund have gone within 1 point of the leaders Bayern Munich. They've beaten Schalke by 4-0. Erling Haaland among the goal scorers. It's ended Augsburg 1, Wolfsburg 2, Fortuna Düsseldorf 0, SC Paderborn 0, Hoffenheim 0, Hertha Berlin 3 and RB Leipzig 1, Freiburg 1. It kicks off at 5:30 between Eintracht Frankfurt and Borussia Mönchengladbach. That is the kind of unusual situation we're in today, giving you Bundesliga scores, but it's the only sport happening really anywhere in the world. Lads, Dan and Johnny, the League of Ireland, I saw the FAI released last night a pilot behind closed doors tournament involving Dundalk, Shamrock Rovers, Derry and Bows. They'll return to training on June the 8th. And then hopefully at the end of July or August, we'll have that pilot tournament at the Aviva Stadium. What are the confidence levels that this will work?
Well, it's unusual, John, that I think that like this tournament has been flagged for some time. Well, I say some time. I mean, it feels like some time. It's probably only a news cycle over the course of a week or 10 days, but it's been pretty relentless that this was going to be explored. And Niall Quinn had spoken about wanting this tournament perhaps to be the forerunner, almost to be an experiment of sorts in a way, to show that, I suppose, that we can manage operations here to run games, and particularly with the Aviva being thrown into the equation, that almost certainly, if we're going to have international games this year in rugby and football, it might well be behind closed doors at the stadium. So from one aspect, I think they wanted to find a tournament to put teams there to see how that would work, but also as I suppose to lay out the roadmap for a return to play. Now, I'm not sure if all the 4 clubs were fully expecting this statement to go out, because while they've been invited to play in this tournament, they haven't accepted as such yet. Now, these 4 teams, I think, are probably, there's a split within the league at the moment about coming back, more so based on probably financial concerns. There's curiosity about how the health arrangements will work. But if the health arrangements are okay, and that's the key thing here, there still is concerns about coming back financially, whereas I think these 4 clubs would be very much more in favour of coming back if possible. But I'm not sure if they were expecting a statement to necessarily go out. But listen, we're not going to get bogged down too much on that. It is significant still that we are going to try and do something, but it's, as I said earlier about this Bundesliga, I think the whole football world is going to watch, and maybe if they can get through a couple of weeks and it appears that it's safe and it appears that it's working, then maybe we'll have a bit more confidence to try it out. But obviously, the financial picture here would be, far less money than it would be in Germany. So there's other factors to bring into it. But for example, I think some of the clubs in Ireland would have hoped to get back training next week, whereas now they're actually being told to really hold off until June the 8th. So there is a degree of caution here from the FAI in tandem with health officials, but you really have to respect that.
Amateur and underage clubs can return to play on August the 28th. PFAI survey says 87% want to return to play, 88% want to see testing in place. Niall Quinn was on OTB AM yesterday. He was good enough to give us his time, talking about medical support, which I think exists there. But the question I really can't work out in my head is, where's the money going to come from for all of this? You don't have any gate receipts. The FAI is in a financial quandary, given past issues. Where's the money going to come from to kind of support behind closed doors football?
That's the question that everyone is. Sorry, Johnny.
I think we should be conscious of the fact that we are in May, and this is an evolving situation. The ability to have some people at games may well change. As we understand more about the virus, and there's obviously this fear of a second wave. I think that's what everyone's obviously afraid of. So we'll be able to see what's happening around other grounds, other places in Europe, and will we be allowed to have? It's not as if there's 20,000 at League of Ireland games, so it might not be entirely behind closed doors. If you could make some sort of funding model, obviously Dan and I had Quinn on Off the Ball on League of Ireland Weekly during the week. A lot of positive stuff, but nothing very concrete. So the streaming has a bit of potential. The one thing I would say is the Bundesliga is the only show in town today. The League of Ireland show to an extent. The League of Ireland will be to an extent with no rugby or GAA and little enough probably going on in Europe. We'll have a more prominent place for potential streaming, but I would guard against this notion that there won't be crowds at matches for the rest of the year, because that's far from assured.
Well, but I'm not sure if it is, though, Johnny, with the plans that have been crafted. For example, right, the fact that there isn't 20,000 at League of Ireland games is almost irrelevant, because the capacity of some grounds is so small that actually it lends itself in some cases to being unsafe, because they'd be pretty congested within there. So it's to do with the size of the facility. And what the FAI are certainly looking at initially is just using a small number of venues neutrally, where if they are going to cover the cost of the medical side of things, and John, you're leading on finances, but they clearly want to put their own teams in a small number of venues, run games Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and that's how they think they can manage it, rather than bringing everyone around the country. And I know, there will be clubs unhappy with that. There's travel and there's costs, but the problem we have, right?
Dan, where does the first division come in on this then?
But Johnny, let me finish. Johnny, let me finish first, right? The problem that we have is that you could be right. You could be right that in September we have a slightly different discussion, or in October we have a slightly different discussion. But clubs need to probably decide by the end of May what to do for the rest of the year. And they can't keep maybe paying players or people with a view to something that might happen in September or October. You need to have some kind of certainties financially about what's going to happen. So at the end of May, you probably need to plan, if you are going to go ahead with it, and some clubs are still very sceptical, you have to plan and budget within this neutral grounds plan, as though there won't be fans. And if there is fans, there's a bonus. But you can't make decisions on the basis of there being spectators, because we don't know where we're going to be in September, October, and we can't indefinitely, those clubs that are paying, keep paying with a view to hoping that it gets better in September, October. We cannot make a decision on that basis.
Well, against that, if you have a 50-50 choice and it's kind of a touch and go, should we play football or not, with the possibility that things will change, or will we just down tools for the year? I think I'd take the former.
Well, of course. But I mean, at the same time, I want football to come back, but you at the same time, you can't decide indefinitely to wait. You need to, I think people in reality, if we're going to come back and play, it's going to have to be behind closed doors with no fans, and plan it as though it will be that initially.
Well, I think when Leo Goradker was talking about the All-Ireland finals, he said behind closed doors, and I think that as a lot of GA players have said this week, I spoke to Shane Downey, the Limerick hurler, if it's safe to have social distancing, it's safe to have crowds, because you can't have lads in a dressing room and then involved in a contact sport unless there's rigorous testing. And for GA and soccer, it's different, because soccer, they might have the money to get involved in the medical support for testing. The Bundesliga, I think, as Dan says, will be instructive. Just been obviously asking listeners about the best atmospheres they've experienced in such a range of different responses. Best ever Premier League atmosphere will go up a level when Leeds come back. That's from Tony and Carlo. Lads, the best atmosphere ever was when Donnelly came back from a virtual career-ending injury to win the Irish Gold Cup at Leopardstown. The crowd held their breath coming into the last, but the roar that went up when he landed safely was deafening. Phenomenal scenes around the parade ring afterwards. There were true racing fans back then, and not the party drinking crowd that go now, says Declan.
This one, so unfortunately I wasn't a racing fan at that time, and this is one of my big gripes about the racing experience for a few years now, essentially, and maybe Cheltenham is an exception, but Irish race meetings, you'll go along and it's just not normal anymore to really cheer on these horses. It's just normal to stand and maybe clap. I remember when Pinatubo won the Dewhurst, or rather won the National Stakes at the Curragh. Unbelievable performance, as good as you get, and there was like a very polite applause. Even in jumps meetings, I've seen proper horses win. I remember NYLN winning at Naas, unbelievable performance, barely a murmur in the crowd. If you want to know what racing was like back in the day, watch Donnelly. That's the best atmosphere I've ever heard for a horse race. And Donnelly was before my time, but Donnelly mattered to people, and you could tell it mattered. And I honestly cannot watch that YouTube clip without getting really emotional watching it, because that's what racing should be. And if we don't get atmosphere back at racing, there's kind of no point going anymore.
Well, obviously for the reason of just to keep the industry alive, I suppose, is the...
Well, you'll have the situation where you'll be able to survive, basically, like you have the casino in America. French people don't go racing anymore. They have the Paris Mutual.
Yeah.
You can basically just go... So it's one soulless racecourse to another, unless we get the atmosphere back. And that is a big challenge for racecourse.
Yeah, once we get through this pandemic. This is a great one. Celtic Leeds, 1970 European Cup semi-final, second leg at Hampden Park. A record European attendance of 108,000. Celtic won 2-1 after going 1 down. Never heard anything like it since. Got my tickets from Jock Steen on the steps of Hampden Park half an hour before kick-off. Someday that was from Tony and Ballier.
That's a hell of a story now, to be fair. Not your average tale you'd hear down the pub from someone about getting tickets for a game, to be fair.
Trevor Gordon on Twitter. Trevor Gordon, Finn Harps, Longford in the promotion relegation playoff at Finn Park 2002. The old tin shed heaving, a comeback from 2-0 down to go 3-2 up. I've been at football matches all over the world, but never experienced a better atmosphere. UEFA Cup final 2003, incredible experience. Even Barry Davies said on the BBC during the game, he's covered loads of European finals, over 35, and he'd never seen anything like the Celtic fans. Hi, best games I was at for crowd noise and atmosphere, all international matches. Ireland-Russia, Delhi-Mount 74. That's his first international, the texter. Ireland-Italy, Delhi-Mount 83. Ireland-Romania, Genoa 1990. England-Ireland, Wembley 91. Ireland-Italy, Giant Stadium. The best, Italy versus Ireland, Stadio Olimpico 1990, when the Italians were cheering. You feel the stadium shake. That was from Colin and Navan. And hi, the best atmosphere I experienced, Holland-Ireland playoff at Anfield. Jack's last game, that is from Stephen. The Derry City thing was interesting during the week, the All-Ireland League, but surely this is all about the IFA. The IFA have to be behind this kind of thing for it to actually get any kind of legs.
Yeah, I'll leave that one to Dan. I find the All-Ireland League chat kind of... I know there's an opportunity, but there's just so many more pressing issues at the moment. Maybe it is a good time to talk about it, but I'll leave it to Dan on this one.
Well, I don't know. I still think it's a time to talk about it because, sometimes... people are too busy to find the time to do it. I know that the clubs on both sides of the border at the moment, although Derry are obviously the other side of the border, but in our footballing jurisdiction, that they're in this.
On it now. You got to be careful.
No.
but they are. I think it now is actually a time to actually have a proper discussion about it and engage and get to actually, in some strange way, the crisis that we're experiencing at the moment is a reminder to clubs in both leagues that how much they share in common, as opposed to what separates them. And like the smaller leagues within European football at the moment, it's not as easy for them to come back as it is just for leagues that have massive TV money. So like what's happened with this at the moment is that we initially had this plan that there would be an all-Ireland league, as in everyone joined together. Then, as you rightly said, John, like the IFA really had an issue and they weren't allowing their clubs to almost contribute to any debate around it. And Kieran Loosedown and his people, in fairness to them, come back with what is a sort of a solution, a hybrid solution that allows both leagues to retain a degree of independence. That half the season would be domestic, and then the second half of the season, the final third of the season would be cross-border. And then you would eventually have a knockout like playoffs at the end to create like a king of the island. But I think that title might need to be worked on. But it's almost an MLS style conferences thing, or even an NFL or whatever, for the second half of the season. And the hope is that by doing that, you can maybe retain a degree of the European places and retain a degree of independence. Because if we're completely honest about it, a lot of the fears that do exist about this in Northern Ireland are tied in with, and I was on a radio debate yesterday on BBC Radio Foyle in Derry with a journalist based in Belfast, and they said it quite clearly that there would be fears that this might be used as a way of almost blindfolding people and leading them towards an all-Ireland national team. And that would be a big fear for people involved with clubs up there. And I think that what they've tried to do is introduce an idea that allows them to retain a degree of independence, which matters a lot to them. And I think it's worth looking at. And Derry's statement that came out in support of it is significant because they're supporting this new proposal, which wouldn't go far enough for some people down here, but it might just be a way to get us towards strongly looking at it and normalise the idea of cross-border games in a way that maybe over time we can look towards the plan A, but I think it's definitely worth looking at because where we're going at the moment, it's not new and original. This is we're almost, and we've got nothing to lose territory by trying something like this out, pending, of course, the approval of UEFA if they can actually allow it.
We've got about 3 minutes left, guys. The bad news is, you know what next week World Cup year is?
02, is it?
Saipan.
02? Oh. Well, we can just... the text lines are going to be interesting for that one.
The text line will not exist on the Sunday. It'll exploded.
I was on Live Score today for the first time, probably since the last time there was any football on a Saturday. I think we should revert the show to Dan and I becoming absolute bluffers in German football from now on, to be honest.
Saipan will get the pulse racing, I think. I still think it'll get it racing. Lads, thanks so much for today.
Thank you, John.
No problem, JD. Any plans for the evening?
I'm going to go to my nephew. I want to actually say this. My nephew Daniel is 18 today. So I want to wish Daniel Munro a very happy 18th birthday, and we're going to maybe blow out a few candles on a cake at socially distant levels.
If you're socially distant, John, you probably won't be able to reach the candles yourself. That could be the challenge. It'll be all up to him.
Make sure Daniel doesn't do an impression of you at Euro 96 by the end of it.
Well, I was a little bit older than Daniel, but I think he's definitely more responsible than I am.
Happy birthday, Daniel.
Yeah, so lads, thanks so much. I look forward to next week's chat about Saipan. That's Daniel McDonnell from the Irish Independent and Johnny Ward, the broadcaster and journalist there. It's been a great reaction today to 1974 and also to the atmosphere question that we put out about just even a few of these just to finish up. I love all sports. My favourite atmosphere of all time. All-Ireland hurling replay 2013 when Clare beat Cork electric from beginning to end with the perfect result. That is from Mary in Ennis. Donody was brilliant, but Tom Foley, the trainer, I think was the reason we all took the horse to our hearts. He was a wonderful man, genuine man. That is from Liam. No question, 1991, comeback for Tip at Semple Stadium against Cork. 9 points down, 15 minutes to go. Once it started, you could feel it rising. There was no way of stopping it. Then the pitch invasion. That was incredible. So thanks so much for your messages today. Just in terms of what's coming up on Off the Ball tonight and tomorrow. So OTB's Classic Game Club arrives on Virgin Sport HD tonight. We're kicking off with a Champions League firecracker. Manchester United coming from 2 goals down against Juventus to book their place in the 1999 final. Owen Sheehan, Jerger Roy and Nathan Murphy will take you on a deep dive into that dramatic night in Turin from 6 o'clock tonight. Don't forget then tomorrow on Off the Ball Sunday with Joe Malloy in the chair from 1, our feature football interview with Packy Bonner, the Republic of Ireland and Celtic goalkeeping legend. There's the paper review with Maura Tracy Nikali and Kieran Cunningham. Seamus Power is the guest on Golf Weekly, and then between 5 and 6 our rugby expert Neil Tracy will be speaking to Paul Warwick. We'll also have Keith Wood's State of the Union. Remember to check out our podcast network on offtheball.com to listen back to our shows, including our Saturday panel today with Alan Quinlan and Mike Ross on the Munster and Leinster Odyssey in European Cup finals in rugby and a World Cup 1974 chat. Thanks for listening this afternoon to News Talk 2 Off the Ball Saturday. Please stay safe. Bye-bye.